Hedera crushed it in quarter three. All right, what is up, guys? Frugalnauts here, and we got the Hedera end of the year community call coming up. We're going to be viewing this with Mance Harmon, Eric Piscini, Dr. Lehman Baird, as you know, Charles Atkins, Rob Allen, the whole bunch of heavy hitters in the Hedera ecosystem, hosted by Ryan Solomon, a friend of the channel and founder of GenFinity. So this is going to be a fun one. Welcome to the show. Hope everyone's doing well out there today. Just kind of an extra thing because I thought this was pretty cool to cover. And as you know, I've been trying to do more Hedera stuff because I really feel like Hedera has been doing some really awesome stuff lately. And we're just waiting for this to start. Should be starting in about 5 minutes, maybe 4 minutes. So stay tuned. In the meantime, I can talk about some stuff I've been finding. What did I share just today? First off, I'm really curious what they're going to say here, because there's been a lot of really strong news on Hedera. It's been kind of unbelievable, actually. But meanwhile, if you're just tuning in here, please hit the like and subscribe button. Of course, those really help the channel, help us grow. Meanwhile, I started following a new account called Chainspect. Excuse me, I should get that right. It's got a little T in it. Chainspect, and they got some really interesting data. The one I thought was interesting, I pulled this up. I'm going to share this really quick before the broadcast starts. All right, that didn't work as well as I thought it would. Here we go. They're showing top 5 by Nakamoto coefficient. Now, if you're wondering what that is the level of decentralization, and it's the number of individual independent entities that would need to attack a chain to take it over or disrupt it. Very high on Polkadot and Moonbeam, which is funny because, you know, I have not done anything with Moonbeam. Crust, then Ton, then Avalanche. And Algorand is not on this list, which I think is kind of strange, though. But followed by Cardano, Tezos, Solana, and Sui. Hedera is also not on this, which should be a little concerning. Solana down at number 20. It's actually even, believe it or not, even lower than that. I had a little conversation with Justin Bonds today about that. Actually, it is on the list. I'm sorry. Algorand is number 14 on the list, so it's on there. Score of 12 according to this. So if this is accurate, but Solana's is not, then it's, you could say that Algorand is more decentralized, but I'm not really sure. If we're taking, you know, I think we're going to be even. We have to be even across the board and assume that it's wrong across the board and use it as a metric that way. Now, some say there should be a different metric here for evaluating decentralization, but I think that's interesting anyway. So I thought that was worth checking out. And then there was this other one I wanted to look at that I thought was kind of interesting while we wait for the broadcast to start. This is the leaderboard for, they say fastest. I think it's a volume metric, though. It's not speed. Speed is like, I think you're measuring speed when you're talking about total TPS, because it's the maximum amount of speed or a maximum amount of transactions it can handle. But this is like actual usage. So I think this should be a usage metric and not a fastest. It just doesn't make sense to me. You know what I mean? So anyway, I just want to cover a couple of these things before we get the community call started, which it has not yet. We're just waiting for that to start. But you can see here ICP at the very top, 1,000, over 1,000 TPS. This is actual usage, by the way. This is not, this isn't like max, because obviously a lot of them on here are much, much higher in terms of like total potential. But this is what's getting used. ICP is getting used and Solana is getting used, and then BNB chain to a much lesser extent than Base. Again, I don't see Hedera and I don't see Algorand on here, and that's something, you know, you have to think about that. It'd be interesting to look at this chart overall. In fact, we can. Let's make sure our call hasn't started yet. It has not. Should be starting really soon. This is all free, by the way. I'm just looking for ones. There's Near on here, Arbitrum, Suia number 15, then Ethereum, then Algorand. So Algorand's actually below Ethereum in terms of numbers of transactions that are happening per second. And then Hedera's down there around 4 to 5. So Hedera's about half of Algorand, maybe a little bit more than that. And Bitcoin's only 5. So, Bitcoin's not even up there. And there's Tezos, which is kind of interesting. So, I mean, if you want to find out what's actually being used, I think this is a good, I actually really like this, platform. I'm going to use it more. And we still haven't started, it looks like. And then they have the max too. Apparently ICP, according to this, has a theoretical max of 209. That's a lot. Solana's is 65,000. It's funny that they're almost kind of matching in some ways. Then apparently this Somnia, I've never even heard of Somnia, and it is almost 1 million. I'm just going to refresh this to make sure it hasn't started yet. Oh, here we go.
Okay, well, thank you, Brian. It's good to be here with you and the community here at the end of 2025. It's been a fantastic year. It's been a very exciting year. Look, what changed? In a word, 2 words, Donald Trump. Donald Trump changed the market. And the way he changed the market was by bringing in an SEC leadership team that is not antagonistic to the crypto industry in the way that the prior administration.
That is totally true, by the way. It's actually a night and day difference. And while I definitely have my quibbles about Donald Trump, especially the way he treated the Rob Reiner thing lately, I just thought that was awful and would have been awful from anybody. You can't deny that his administration has been very much more open to crypto, and the people he's hired, I think, are some pretty smart people who actually understand crypto and understand what it means to have sensible regulation. So I totally agree with that.
Team was, and what that means is that the industry and primarily the finance industry was effectively given permission to participate in a way that they previously didn't feel like they could. There's been a lot of pent-up demand for a lot of years. People have known the value associated with the tech and how it can be applied for finance in particular. I'm not just focusing on finance. Obviously, there's a lot of cool stuff going on more generally in just enterprise and large scale use cases. But finance is kind of special at the moment because the world of finance now feels at liberty to move forward in a way that they didn't prior to the new administration. And that is having ripple effects around the globe. Now that the US is getting involved and setting the rules that are required to regulate the industry, it's a race. And that's affected the industry. It's affected us as a project. It's helped to shape our strategy going forward as a project, which I'm sure we're going to touch on. But it's just the world of difference has happened because we now have an administration that's willing to move forward as opposed to try and hold things back.
100%. Oh, go ahead. Who's got it next?
Yeah. So yes, so there's some regulatory clarity in the United States anyway, which has been enormously helpful. Also, I think we're finally seeing come to fruition a lot of POCs and thinking about it and planning it and exploring it. And then this really was the year where a lot of the financial institutions were deciding, yes, this is a real thing for finance. And so we got permission for ETFs and things. We have derivatives and things being done on it. And we have the big financial players buying into it. And I think that it's a long process. They move very slowly, and it has taken them years to decide, is this really something we want? And this is the year where it really did come to fruition. And they were saying this is something we want. And so regulatory clarity in one country was enormously helpful, but also just the world as a whole, I think, was getting to the point of maturity where it moves from POC to real world. And this is the year when we saw it go to real world. And that meant financial things. And this is sort of a theme I think we're going to have. I think what we see is that people are realizing that it's useful for real things that involve real money. This is serious now. It's great. And the thing I love the most is I'm not sitting here saying, in 2026, I think it's finally going to become real. I don't have to say that. 2025, it became real. I just love it.
I'd love to hear from Eric, from your viewpoint as well. I think all of you guys maybe have a little bit of a different take on this, but you guys have been dealing with certainly a lot of enterprise and a lot of kind of the technical work coming out of the Hashgraph stance. But Eric, your thought on why we're starting to see more kind of real world applications going live, and it seems like the past, like I said, 12 to 18 months really just ramped up compared to the entire history previously.
Yeah, and as you guys know, I've been in this industry for 13 years now. So finally we get there, right? Finally we get real adoption of the technology by real businesses, large-scale businesses. I think, in addition to what happened outside of our control, which is the regulatory environment and the adoption, what we also did inside every one of these organizations here on the call today is also very interesting, right? Because you could say, great things happen outside of my control and I don't do anything and that I just observe, right? But we didn't. We actually did a lot of things to benefit from that wave. And that's why, for example, we launched HBAR, which is a private version of Hedera, because we saw that the adoption by the enterprise market was very critical to our success. And they needed a private version of Hedera in addition to the public version. So we launched this, right? We didn't sit and wait. We are all of us very proactive in launching new solutions, new services. At the foundation, the work that the foundation did on the ecosystem and the liquidity is tremendous. And that's a huge lift for all of us as well, right? So there is a lot of excitement there. But at the same time, you have to reflect back when Lehman and Mann started this project, and they set the stage for us to be here today, continuing to be the adults in the room. And when you go into the enterprise market, being the adult in the room is a very big deal, right? With the fixed fees, the governing council, the fair ordering, all of those things that we keep talking about for many, many years, those resonate really, really well today because of the investment made over the last 7 years.
I think that's going to be a theme that we probably hear a lot of today, is just kind of the maturity of the ecosystem and all of the players within the ecosystem. Kamal, I want to ask you as we kind of move forward. Same question, but I mean, you have an interesting viewpoint here coming out of the Middle East, Africa, and Europe. We've seen a ton of adoption there, and more adoption, and compared to what we've seen in the United States. But this year, these past 18 months, what does it look like from your guys' purview and what you're witnessing there with things going live, things like that?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having us here in this session. And I can fully echo what Mance and Lehman and Eric mentioned before. Actually, if you want to summarize the reason behind the mass, or let's say the mainstream adoption when it comes to Web3 solutions in general or DLT-enabled use cases, you can look into 4 factors. Number one is the legal certainty and the mature regulatory frameworks that has been established across different jurisdictions from strategic regions, plus the support that we have received from President Trump since last year. That changed the entire equation and changed how businesses, governments, and regulators look into the digital assets and Web3 business in general. Number two, a second critical and crucial factor is enhanced maturity when it comes to use cases and when it comes to the business viability of the different use cases with great flagship projects. Basically, we have seen great asset tokenization projects, digital identity solutions deployed and adopted by great and top-tier banks and large corporates, which is confirming their legal certainty and their view when it comes to Web3 adoption. Number 3, in my view, is a reasonable balance between Web3 solutions and existing legacy systems. So we are no longer competing with Web3 existing systems, but we are kind of looking how can we build viable and value contributing Web3 solutions that are leveraging the existing systems and the core systems without kind of competing with these existing systems. And last but not least is the increased institutional capital dedicated for Web3 investments, be it through structured products, be it ETFs or ETPs or sell-ins or others. And also the support coming from investors that are looking to invest in DLT-enabled businesses, and Web3 investment cases in general. So if you look at these factors in general, that's what you need to have a vibrant ecosystem. So you need talent. That's something that we have supported by providing training and certification over the last few years. You need infrastructure and regulatory frameworks and legal certainty for entrepreneurs and builders to design, develop, and deploy their businesses and commercialize them. The third factor, as I mentioned earlier on, is the capital and the funding. And once we have all these factors together, that's what you need to have a thriving community within a vibrant ecosystem. And that's what we have succeeded in building within Hedera HashGraph.
Awesome. Yeah, certainly a flywheel effect and lots of different cogs in the wheel. I want to ask Charles, because I think, you know, you're certainly suited to answer this question as well. And, you know, Hedera Foundation has made massive strides this past year. So I think a huge kudos to you guys. Your just take, you know, in general, we're starting to see a lot more go live. You guys are obviously instrumental in a lot of that stuff going live from the Hedera ecosystem viewpoint. And I would love maybe just kind of your broad take, Charles.
Yeah, kind of echoing what people have said so far, but one of the things that I would say is people are starting to educate themselves more about what Hedera is and how it was originally structured. And that's creating a really big impact on them wanting to adopt this technology. When, you know, you look at the three different types of blockchains out there, the public and permissionless, and then you have private and permissioned, and then you have Hedera, which is public but permissioned. And with regulatory clarity, a lot of people started diving into, hey, let's educate ourselves on this area. And what they're finding out is, wow, we're pretty comfortable with this. This is exactly how the internet is set up. You know, DNS root servers are permissioned, and the public has access to all of it. And then guess what? Institutional grade everything for retail users, just like Google, Gmail, G Drive. But guess what? Institutions use it too.
So this is what I've been saying about Hedera for a long time. I think the fact that the permission part isn't necessarily going to be a turnoff to some of these big companies. And I think they see some of these huge corporations getting involved in Hedera, and that is a huge signal for a lot of these enterprise solutions. So that's why I think this is really bullish for Hedera, and why I think Hedera has seen so much adoption. I think there's certain elements of it around Hedera that matter to these bigger companies. This is what they want to see. So what the average crypto degen thinks is super duper important in crypto might not be what what enterprise sees as important. When I say enterprise, by the way, I just mean like businesses, basically. When we talk about enterprise, it's versus like the retail. Like the average person, we might think, oh, it's got to be totally decentralized and, you know, blah, 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 blah. And totally unpermissioned. Well, that for certain aspects, yeah. But, you know, I think Hedera is a very enterprise focused enterprise itself. And I think having all these big players on board, like having Google and IBM, LG running nodes and being part of the governing council, I think that sends a huge signal to other companies that like, hey, this is someone we want to do business with. So I think he's totally right. He did say, and I hope they ask my question, because my question is, they talked about in the beginning of the year that they were going to focus on retail because that was a really important part that enterprise want to see. They want to see that retail demand. I wonder how that played out, if they did that, and whether that had an impact is what I really want to know.
And so you get this situation where, you know, Hedera, a lot of our ecosystem, you know, internally we use Gmail to send messages. You may have an individual Gmail address, but somehow those still get delivered to each other because it's institutional grade for everybody. So when people kind of got the green light from Trump to go and investigate this stuff, well, guess who's the only blockchain that's kind of set up exactly like the internet? It's permissioned with the governing council, and it's accessible to the public. And guess what? How do new network upgrades roll out to the internet? Well, it goes through a process from ICANN and IANA that looks pretty dang similar to how HIPs happen. And then those are deployed by the council. So we have the situation where now people have the green light to investigate, and the investigation is returning that Hedera actually set up just like the internet, and that makes them pretty comfortable with using us. So once we saw that timing start to happen, the foundation really wanted to pour gas on that fire and say, hey, look, now the light bulb's clicking on for everyone. How do we make sure that you have the financial capability to actually adopt this? So really, we were kind of waiting around for the timing, but the original structure that Lehman and Mance set out, it was familiar to everybody. They just needed the green light to go and do the investigating.
I think, you bring up a really interesting point, and kind of this was kind of the intentional lead in of this question, where we are seeing a lot more go live. And if you kind of look, as Charles mentioned, and kind of in that purview, the Hedera network seems to be positioning itself as kind of the trust layer of this new digital economy. So given that, I'm going to ask all of you guys if you can kind of touch base on what you feel like a global trust layer needs to deliver. And why is Hedera uniquely built to serve in that role? Lehman, I see you ready to go.
I love the question. To become the trust layer of the internet, the utility the entire planet needs, you need a network that's fast, fair, secure. This is very, very important. But you even more need one that is well governed. You have got to be able to trust the governance. And there is a natural tendency for projects to end up saying, oh, everybody can help run our project. And it ends up being a handful of people, and you don't know who they are. And they're sort of self-appointed. And it's a few people in smoke-filled rooms making the decisions. It's a few developers or a few pool owners or some mining or some staking pool owners or hashing pool owners. And you end up with a few people with unlimited control over the system. You don't know who they are or how they're making their decisions. This is not the way to do it. This isn't how ICANN and INIA, the ones you were just talking about, work with the DNS. This is not how you run something that everyone on the planet is going to depend on. What you need is transparent governance. You need to make sure that there are truly independent entities that are governing it, and you know who they are, and they have a reputation that they care about, and you see the minutes of their meetings, and you know what's going on. And so what is it that the world really needs? They need something that is fast, fair, and secure. Absolutely, this is what they need. But they also need something that is well governed so that they can trust it. This is the key to providing the Web3 world that really started this year and is just continuing to grow in the future.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. When we started all of this back in 2017, the model was incredibly controversial. Right. I mean, you either loved Hedera or you hated Hedera in the industry. I mean, now the industry back then was a lot more tribal than it is today. And we've matured as an industry. But when it comes to building real world financial use cases on infrastructure like this, it's not controversial. It's anything but, right? If you don't have some kind of model that provides the transparency in who's operating the validator nodes and the governance associated with the protocol and the network, it's a non-starter. You don't even get considered. So what we have in Hedera is the right model for the emerging wave of finance-related use cases. It's the right governance model, it's the right operational model, and now with HashGraph or HashSphere, the private network version of the protocol, that completes the suite that is needed for adoption. When we look at these use cases that are on the cusp of going mainstream, the finance-related use cases specifically is what I'm thinking of. Those are going to have elements of both. There will be private network instances running that support those use cases, bridge to public networks. The bridge between HashSphere and Hedera is going to be fantastic in terms of security and cost and performance, unlike anything else in the market. We have sort of a trifecta of tech and governance and trust that is needed for this coming wave. And it's very exciting. We're exactly positioned where we need to be.
I want to ask Eric, because
let me add,
go ahead.
I'll add on to that real quick. Just, kind of to what Mance was saying, and I use a lot of times I use this Google and Gmail and Google G Suite analogy because it's simple for somebody like me to understand. But the dynamic between HashSphere and the public mainnet, I'll give you an example of why that's so powerful. So you have your own instance of G Suite, or let's say it's a G Doc, and you go in and you want to set the permissions of share settings. You can make somebody an editor, commenter, or a viewer only, or you can share that. And when you share that with somebody outside of your private network, an alert will pop up and it says you're about to share this with somebody of the public. This is exactly how HashSphere and the mainnet will work together. And this is the thing, is when you are sending messages within a HashSphere, within your organization, it's completely secure. Do you want someone to be a commenter, a viewer, an editor of, well, obviously, editing is going to be difficult on a hash graph, but, same type of thing. You start to share that outside of your network, and, here we are again. These are things that were constructed from the very beginning. We just get excited about it now because people are starting to realize this is what's been in Lehman and Mance's head for 15 years now. So, it's finally starting to come to fruition, be built, and people are starting to understand it through analogy of things that they use every single day. It's just now you're going to have the trusted layer of the internet. And I will tell you that with AI coming in, when I open open the internet and open my feed and I see, videos of Queen Elizabeth body slamming Hulk Hogan, that's not really the type of the internet that's probably going to last forever. You need to have some proof of humanity in there. And that's what, having HashSpheres run with mainnet completely verified in a system that already runs like the internet, it's going to work well for everybody. Sorry, Eric, I cut off your question.
No, that was great. And I think you make a really valid point too, which is it has to make sense to people based on what they're already using. And I think that's kind of where we're headed towards. And I think everybody can attest to the fact that trust and authenticity are quickly becoming one of the world's most scarcest assets. But Eric, I want to ask you from the HashSphere standpoint, who better to develop trust than these enterprises and institutions themselves? And I think a HashSphere really gives them that opportunity to build up that level of confidence that they would need in a secure environment. And you had a really good kind of branding phrase of HashSphere. I don't know if you'll say it in here in relation to mainnet, but feel free to take it as far as the trust standpoint. Eric, would love your thoughts on trust.
Yeah, I think, and Charles used a really good example, but I'll tell you what's happening in the network, in the market, right? So what we were working on is trying to convince large organizations with a lot of regulatory constraints, data residency, and so on, to use a public ledger. And when you say public ledger to them, they were closing the code right away, right? They just couldn't engage. And I was tired of saying no. We don't have a solution for you, right? I want to be able to say yes to them and offer them something. So when we get together as an executive team at Hashgraph and we said, okay, we have to address that need, HashSphere was a very natural extension of what we do today. And the way we think of HashSphere is an entry point, a gateway to using the code base of Hedera, but also probably at some point to use a public ledger, right? But we don't want to create that friction up front. So we want to say, engage with us, start building, start using. If you want to stay on an HashSphere, if you want to remain closed and private forever, good, you can do that. We believe that at some point you will need to be exposed or connected or bridged or completely integrated into the public ledger. You have an opportunity to do that as well. So the optionality is really what we offer to the market. Really, really important, because now we don't say no to our clients. We always say yes. And I like to say that.
100%. And I want to ask Kamal, I know from the Hashgraph Association standpoint, there's been a lot of real world adoption that has been built on trust. I think of the interview I did with BIA Group. So that's, yes, I believe, one of the largest sustainability waste management out of like the UAE, and PwC is another one that rings a bell. Yep. I would love your take on global trust and why Hedera is just uniquely suited for a role like this.
Absolutely. To start with, a lot of kudos to Mance and Lehman. I mean, Hedera, when it has been kicked off and started back in 2017 and 18. It was a unique time. And then back at the time in 2017, we had basically two categories of blockchain solutions. We had the public ledgers, and back at the time we had Bitcoin and Ethereum. And then we have the private ones, which is Hyperledger and Corda. And then Hedera came like in a very interesting time and filling the gap, which is
Kamal froze on us.
Uh,
All right, so we'll let's try to get. Oh, he's going to come back in, so we'll go right back to him. So I'm going to move forward, and then when Kamal comes back in, we'll try to get him back on that question. But we've had a ton of real-world signals this year as well, and some of these are recent. And there's no way I'm going to be able to encompass all of these, even on a daily basis, probably. But more recently, Nation of Georgia's Memorandum of Understanding, Project Acacia with the Reserve Bank of Australia, the integration of Hedera Guardian with Vera, which is the world's largest independent sustainability standards body, a wave of enterprise and institutional deployments. What do these milestones tell you about Hedera's trajectory as global digital infrastructure? Are there any milestones that particularly stand out to you guys? Before we get to that question, I'm going to go back to Kamal because we have audio.
Thank you. I was saying that a lot of kudos to Mans and Lehman for initiating the project Hedera. Back at the time, we had only two categories. We have the public ledgers and the fully private permissioned ones. The public ones, back at the time, we had Bitcoin and Ethereum, and we have the private versions, which is Corda and Hyperledger. And Hedera was like well positioned to fulfill the gap between these two both worlds. With other words, Hedera was designed and implemented in a way that is addressing the needs for decentralized applications by providing a public ledger that is accessible for individuals, but also for businesses and enterprises, but at the same time is addressing the needs when it comes to governance and maintaining the network. Imagine you are dealing with
some technical
banks,
panel that
or
we
highly
just
regulated organizations. You still need to have that established trust by having trusted and credible and reliable organizations managing and maintaining the network. So to answer your question, the 4 or the 6 levels that we have been building over the years to establish a vibrant ecosystem for Hedera can be summarized in 6 levels. Number 1 was the governance. That's something that Mans and Lehman elaborated and explained, which was needed to establish the credibility and the trust to be enterprise grade, basically get the trust and the support from enterprises, but at the same time be accessible for innovators, builders, startups, and small and mid-sized enterprises. The second level was the network, and our colleagues at Hashgraph did an amazing and outstanding work in implementing Hedera Hashgraph capabilities, which is one of the best, be it from a performance perspective with a minimum of 10,000 transactions per second, be it in terms of the low cost associated to the transaction fees, or the genius idea of denominating the transaction fees to dollars, which gives enterprises some sort of predictability and stability when it comes to having and approving their business models. They don't have to care about the crypto market. They just know exactly one single transaction costs me XYZ dollars. The third level was basically the ecosystem, which was needed to, number 1, attract and most importantly, retain talent, because this is pretty much needed for the Web3 businesses. So the builders and the developers are basically the driving engine within all the Web3 projects. Number 2, dedicating funding in terms of grants. And I believe back in September 2021, the council approved $5 billion worth of HBARs allocated for the ecosystem development activities, all the way up to different incubation and acceleration programs that we have either deployed within the Hashgraph Association and the foundation, or in partnerships with externals. The third level or the fourth level after the ecosystem is venturing, and that's something that we successfully closed and implemented last week and announced during Abu Dhabi Finance Week. Basically, the continuation for all the great projects that have successfully completed the grant program, but now they are in a stage where they need scale-up funding so that they can expand their businesses, expand their operations, and bring their businesses to the next level. The other 2 levels that are remaining so that we can close the loop and have a symbiotic ecosystem is products and services. And I believe with HashSphere and with the studios that our colleagues at Hashgraph have implemented and deployed over the years are key building blocks that are enabling that, let's say, fully integrated and cohesion ecosystem. And last but not least, which is needed is professional services, basically deploying resources to help enterprises, startups to consume these products and to deploy them smoothly in a way that we create value for Hedera community, for the ecosystem, but also for their businesses. So if you look at these 6 levels from the top to down, it's basically a validation. So the more professional services we are able to deploy in the market, it validates the maturity of the products. The more products we bring to the market, it validates the work that the ventures is doing in terms of picking up great high growth potential use cases from the grant programs and helping them with scale up funding. The more ecosystem and vibrancy we get in the ecosystem, it confirms the enterprise readiness of Hedera platform. And then the more transactions and the more builders we get and the more businesses we manage to attract to build on Hedera, it confirms our unique governance model and vice versa. And also from the bottom to the top, it's validation, or it's enablement. So the governance enables the network enables the ecosystem feeds the funnel for the ventures supports the products, and the products are the enablers for professional services.
100%. So I'm going to go, I'm going to move us back into milestones. And I know we have a good list of questions here still remaining. So we'll try to keep the answers a little bit concise so we can get through all of this. And I mentioned previously Nation of Georgia's Memorandum of Understanding, Project Acacia, Reserve Bank of Australia, Hedera, Guardian, and Vera, the world's largest sustainability standards body. There's so many milestones. And I'm going to kind of go roundtable here because I don't know if we have to. And this is going to continue to be a trend, I would imagine. Lehman, I'll let you start, and then we'll just go around.
Okay, I'll try to be very fast. Everything of value in the world will end up tokenized and traded on ledgers because it is more efficient. You can fractionalize things. You can enforce things. You don't need middleman parties, third parties. There's too many reasons for it. It's the same reason all the information went to databases. We don't have scraps of paper holding all the world's information. This will happen. But how does that happen? Well, at the very top of the pyramid, we have to have tokenized assets. And people are doing that. Gold and silver and real estate and so on being tokenized on Hedera. But we need a lot of infrastructure of the pyramid below that. So what do you need? Hey, I can tokenize my house and sell it. Okay, but how do they know that this token really does apply to your house? You need the country itself to be doing registries. And Hedera has this MOU with the country of Georgia to start doing things like registries. You have to have that. The tip of the pyramid is, hey, we can tokenize things like property. But unless you have the national registries and these other things happening, it becomes very difficult to prove that this token really does represent the thing it's tokenizing. So you need that. And then how are you going to buy and sell things? Well, you have to be able to buy and sell for money in some sense. You need stablecoins. You need stablecoins as the lubricant to make the whole system work. And so you have Project Acacia in Australia, where they're doing things like stable coins. And maybe someday we have CBDCs. There's all sorts of things that you do where you're tokenizing the money so that you can have the lubrication to make the system working. And then just goes on. We're talking about, well, who's going to be doing the buying and selling? Humans? Sure. AIs? We have people like Equity Lab. They're doing, how do you trust the AIs? And we're using Hedera for that. So I won't go through all the answers, but this pyramid is enormous. And the bottom line is that we are seeing real people in the real world building each piece of this pyramid on Hedera right now, which is leading us to the future where everything is tokenized.
Who wants to go next with a milestone?
I'll double click on what Lehman said. I think the race to tokenization is on, right? Across the board, every single asset in the world is going to be tokenized. And the sooner you are, the better you are as an asset manager, for example, or as an identity provider, or as a cash management company. The sooner you tokenize, the better, because you're going to benefit from that technology. I think, today, if you're in the community and you're wondering, where should I invest my time? I would definitely invest my time into what does it take to tokenize an asset and make it available to a lot of people in the world so those people can interact with this asset. It's not a blockchain discussion anymore. It's a tokenization discussion. And I'm going to leave it to when we were in Cybos a few weeks ago, I was expecting Sibos to be the typical financial industry conference where everybody was talking about payments and AI. And the majority of the discussions were tokenization of cash, of currencies, of assets, of real estate. It was just about tokenization. So the race is on.
It's really interesting. And for those that aren't aware, Sibos is Swift's annual event. So that was pretty awesome seeing you guys and the Hedera ecosystem represented there. Milestones, Charles, I'm going to go over to you. Hedera Foundation, I know certainly had some.
I mean, I'll just give, two quick points on this. A lot of the projects that you mentioned, and probably more that you're going to hear in 2026, are people that we've been talking to for years that have been telling us no because HashSphere didn't exist. So now you're starting to see those come live because they do have the optionality of a private network. To Lehman's point, the verification of what an asset is and the prevention of several layers of synthetic assets can only be done through the provenance of tokenization. And this is, going to help with a lot of the financial health of the world in general. But just kind of giving a look into the future and touching on what Eric said about how all pieces of data or tokens or whatever they may be, they all have value to them. And I'll give you a really funny insight. I won't say the names of who this was, but we had a very large system integrator who I had a conversation with, who's about to launch 100,000 AI agents out into their workforce. They asked, how do we prove these agents were permissioned by us? But here's a couple layers deeper that'll give you a look into the future. How do we register them on Workday as employees? And then you ask the question, why do you want them registered as employees? Well, obviously, when these AI agents are trained, we're going to want to upload that information into robotic workers, which may or may not have health and maintenance insurance plans. Okay, so when you start thinking like that, you're like, who administers my robot's insurance plan? Is it my auto carrier? Is it my health carrier? They're all employees on Workday. So this is the kind of thing that, these large organizations are thinking about is, and how do you verify that? You have to do that on a ledger. Like, you can't just have a rogue robot worker out there making insurance claims for itself and collecting money to give to who. And I know this sounds like really out of the world, to people. But if you told people 5 years ago what AI would be doing today, they would also think you're crazy. So it's not that far off that major companies are thinking how to ensure their robot workforce on Workday. And you have to have a private network that connects to a public ledger for auditability to go to a regulatory, some part of the government to verify these things, just like, Department of Employment and all of that stuff. So these things are happening. And to have that happen on Ledger is about the only way you can pull that off.
Yeah,
we're living in a science fiction world.
Yeah, and I think there's still so much education out there. Just as a quick sidebar, like I was out to dinner with my wife a week ago, and I overheard a guy at the table next to us that was saying all the actors in Hollywood went on strike last year because of Sophia, the UN robot. And I'm like, I don't think that's what happened. Milestones from your end, and then Kamal, and then.
Well, just to piggyback on what Charles is saying. So if I had to choose a milestone from the list that you've mentioned, I would certainly go with Project Acacia and RBA. And the reason for that is because it's just the tip of the iceberg that represents so much future usage and demand. And it's foundational to just about everything else that's been discussed here. So I know I know the project that Charles was just mentioning. And when you think about the systems in the enterprise that are concerned with this sort of thing, you think about HR, you think about treasury management, you're thinking about the finance function, et cetera, et cetera. And for that reason, I think it's appropriate for Hedera in the future to continue to care about ESG and AI and tokenization, but through the lens of a finance function. And so it's not a change, but it's a narrowing of scope that is common. It's still kind of horizontal in its function. It's certainly horizontal across these categories of use cases that we care about, but it represents sort of the what we see emerging in the market today, and that's what I'm excited about. What I'm excited about, I've always thought that the mainstream finance players would be the ones to really take advantage of this category of technology in a big way, before the startups. In the world of Web3, we got all the startups that exist, and they're important that they exist because they sort of do all the experiments for the industry and they show the way. But the mainstream players are going to be the ones to make the big money first, unfortunately. But and they're the one, but they're not going to do it alone. They're going to do it in collaboration with organizations like Hedera that are providing that foundational layer of infrastructure that's required for them to be going to market. And it's always been about money. It's always been about the transfer of value. I mean, foundationally, fundamentally, that's what a ledger is useful for. And now we're going to be able to take advantage of that. And it's here. It's happening in 2026.
Milestones, Kamal, from your end, sir. Two minutes. I want to try to get through the rest of the questions here.
No worries. I would. From my point of view, I think there are two key milestones. Number one is the play or the interplay between private ledger or the private ledger of Hedera ecosystem, which is HashSphere, and the mainnet. HashSphere is there to address the needs for privacy, GDPR, and data protections for highly regulated institutions, while the mainnet is still serving the community, the builders and entrepreneurs, and the ones that have favorable regulatory frameworks to build and deploy their solutions on Hedera mainnet. Number two is the fusion of Hedera and AI technologies, which can be a groundbreaking development that will result in a new era of innovation within Hedera ecosystem. And here I do see Hedera as the underlying infrastructure that supports and enables decentralized applications and solutions with a transparent and a public ledger, while AI contributes with the cognitive capabilities needed to analyze data, optimize processes, facilitate decision making, all the way up to automate the executions of these decisions. With other words, the overlap, or better said, the convergence of these two powerful technologies ramped up within the unique governance model of Hedera Hashgraph, I think goes beyond traditional boundaries, and we will see innovative and pioneering business models and use cases evolving within Hedera ecosystem that are leveraging Hedera Hashgraph capabilities in conjunction with AI cognitive capabilities.
I think that's really well put, and it leads me perfectly into kind of all of these pillars of tooling out there that have taken, I'm sure a lot of work to get to the point of how sophisticated yet how simple they are. So we're talking HashSphere, we're talking Stablecoin Studio, AI Studio, Asset Tokenization Studio, Hedera Guardian, I think would fall under that as well. Kamal, I'm going to stay with you here. And so for everybody up here, let's try to go maybe a little bit quicker, rapid fire, so we can get through this. How are these tools adding value to enterprise and government decision-making? How are they enabling rapid deployment? And I think from your purview, Kamal, you guys just wrapped up the Hedera Africa Hackathon with massive numbers. And I'm sure that there were individuals leveraging the different tooling and things like that. But yeah.
I mean, I think you are referring to the studios, to the AI Studio and Stablecoin Studio and to the Guardian, all the way up to the Asset Tokenization and NFT Studio, correct?
Yep.
Yes. I mean, in my view, these are powerful building blocks, which are open sourced, made available to the community, to the businesses, be it enterprises or startups, with modular toolkits that are custom developed and custom designed for Hedera Network, which are also leveraging the core services. These open source SDKs and studios, they provide developers, builders with a wide range of services and tools that help these builders to speed up the transition from a business concept toward a live use case that is implemented on the mainnet. We had very good and positive feedback from the community, more specifically from the hackathon, where we had over 50,000 individuals participated in the hackathon, and over 1,300 projects have been submitted. The majority of them leveraged at least one of these studios, be it the Stablecoin Studio or the Guardian or the AI Studio. It was massive help for the builders and the participants. When it comes to the enterprises and governments, an enterprise, before they start picking up the DLT ledger that they are going to build on, of course, they look at the products, they look at the product suite that we have, they look at the SLAs that you are offering around these products. And there is a hidden component that you are also looking at, which is how big is the developer community? How many people do understand the technology and build on the technology, and what is available there in terms of frameworks, processes, tools that can be reused and can be leveraged to bootstrap the development of Hedera-powered projects. And let's also keep in mind these tools that our colleagues at Hashgraph have built and designed specifically for the ecosystem are the consolidation of years of projects with enterprises, with governmental entities and startups, where basically we consolidated that and then we come up with a unified tool and framework to be reused and deployed again for comparable use cases and solutions.
I think that's huge. I'm going to go round robin here, and I guess I'll go to Lehman next. How does all the tooling on Hedera enable? And I should say briefly here, because I know we're probably going to run out of time. I've interviewed a lot of these kind of business, like these kind of middle organizations that obviously do some of the implementations, the PricewaterhouseCoopers, BCGX, and thank you, Kamal, for helping to put together some of those interviews. And I hear very similar things from all of them, which is we need to get to the point to being able to rapidly deploy solutions. And this is the tooling that does that. So Lehman, I would love your take on rapid deployment, how important that is.
Yeah, what you said. We have experiment. The whole world's finances are moving on to Web3, like Matt said. How do you do that? You need things to enable it. So you need stable coins. Well, how do you build stable coins? You need tools to make it easy to build programs with stable coins. So you need Stablecoin Studio to make it easy for you to do that. Oh, and what else do you need? Well, you have carbon credits are of value, but before you can do that, you have to have tools for tracking it. So we have Guardian that helps you to track that. We have AI is going to be trading these things and a big part of this financial system. Well, how do you trust the AI? Well, we have people like our lab doing that on Hedera, but how do you even implement these AIs and make them work with Hedera? You need AI Studio. It's all about the tools. So to make the goal is all of the world's finance moves onto Hedera or onto ledgers in general, but specifically Hedera. To do that, there's a bunch of things that we need to enable it. And to enable the enablers, you have to have the tools. That's the answer.
Yeah, Ryan, I want to add one thing that we are not mentioning yet, but all those tools are valuable because we have amazing teams helping developers use those tools, right? The developer advocates, shoot out to them, developer relationship teams, and many, many others are really the one making sure that the community understands and use those tools properly, and then continue to improve those tools based on community input. I want to make sure that we don't lose that in the process, right? The tools are great, but the people making those tools great are even more important in my mind. And I want to call that out.
I think, there's so many to probably mention in that regard. I think of all the amazing work, Brandon and HGraph. And what's crazy to me is to see that you have relationships between Project Acacia going on with Reserve Bank of Australia as kind of like one of the solutions integrators with the stuff that they were building out of HGraph. And we'll learn a lot more about that probably in the next call too, from the tech standpoint. So gigantic shout out to the entire Hedera developer community and all of the builders out there. We will not be able to mention them all, and I don't want to make anybody angry here. I want to get us into the next kind of questions we move forward here. Across industries represented, I'm going to start with you, Mans, here, because I think you're best served here. Across industries represented on the council, which is very diverse. Anybody can go and look at the Hedera Council. So many different facets, so many different industries out there that are represented on that council. Where did you see the biggest movement? Maybe it's finance, because you guys alluded to it earlier. From proof of concept to production in 2025, which sectors look positioned to scale in 2026? Are there any industries or use cases flying under the radar? Mance, I will stop rambling and let you take it.
No, well, look, maybe I should have reserved these comments from earlier, but they're the same ones, right? I think that what's happening is that from the very beginning, Hedera was intentionally horizontal in its focus on use cases. What I mean by that is that while most of the other layer ones out there from their inception focused on a use case, you know, when you get introduced to a layer one in 2018, the next question is, what use case that you're building, right? Mm-hmm. And we intentionally recruited council members that crossed sectors. We didn't want just a bunch of banks or a bunch of tech giants or whatever. We wanted the council to represent the full range of use cases because we didn't know where those killer use cases were going to come from. We just couldn't predict it back in 2017, 2018. And now we do, right? At least we know what the next wave is going to be. And coincidentally, it's a wave in finance that is common to nearly all of our council members, right? All of our council members have some kind of finance related function. It could be treasury management. It could be HR. It could be, it could be a supply chain use case where you have to move money from account to account across, 30 different countries. Well, that's finance, right? That's a finance function, but it's related to, supply chain and logistics, et cetera, et cetera. So, again, what we're doing as a project is narrowing the focus from being completely horizontal to now being more focused on finance-related use cases. There are only a handful. We're moving up the stack. We just talked about the different stablecoin or the studios rather, and how they play a role in this. And we're going to move up the stack further. Right, we're going to move up the stack further to solutions, point products that's at that intersection of finance across ESG, AI, and tokenization generally.
That's awesome.
Oh,
go ahead, Charles. Yeah.
Just to put it in real world perspective from something a lot of people are probably working through right now is you're probably going shopping. You may be going to, Target, Walmart, whatever it may be, swiping your credit card. Again, a payment processor is a prime example of this. They have something called DSO, which is days of sales outstanding. So you go swipe your credit card at Target today, they probably don't get actually paid on that from your bank through the processor, through the broker for 30 to 45 days. Now, Target, obviously they need cash flow, they need capital. So their bank typically offers them, a line of.
This, by the way, is called velocity of money. I'm just going to cut in on this one spot because this is absolutely crucial. The big function, people think, well, why am I doing this on credit cards? Why am I doing, what's wrong with the banking system? Why do I care about crypto? It's velocity of money. It's a really important concept in finance. And this is like the big unlock. And he's about to explain, you have to have all these intermediaries to get paid. I covered in my own town, I covered a cheese cracker company that had this huge order for the snack box company. And then it had this huge order for a grocery store chain. It got screwed by the snack box company on payments. So they didn't have the liquidity to create this, to fulfill this huge order that they had. So they had to shut down instead of, they had the business. It was right there. They just didn't have the liquidity to actually fulfill the order and keep running in business. So imagine if it was paid, it had to be paid in real time. Imagine we're going to send you, 200 boxes of these crackers, but you gotta, as soon as you receive it, it activates a smart contract that sends the payment to, the company. This is where crypto actually really comes into play. So I'm going to let him continue explaining that, but that's one spot where I really felt like I had to jump in.
Credit based on their days of sales outstanding at a treasury rate plus 50 basis points, whatever that may be. Now at the scale of Target and Walmart, that's somewhere between $400 to $500 million just in interest payments on that 30 to 45 day float. Now, if Target decides, let's just go bank to bank and issue a stable coin and settle this in 3 seconds. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt and say 20 minutes. they're automatically saving $500 million a year just by implementing a stable coin. And that's the kind of thing where, you know, you talk about finance, it's in every part of our lives. You know, it's from HR, it's from retail sales, consumer payments, it's everywhere. So, you know, again, heavy on the finance. I know the Hashgraph team is really deep in building products. So going from studios to actual products to launch, same thing. This is another internet cycle. This is preventing me from having to set up my own mail exchange with an SMTP server 30 years ago. Now I just log in and get myself a Proton Mail email address. Like that's what Hashgraph's moving into. So really excited about 2026, if you can't tell.
Yeah, no, I this is a total sidebar and it's not out there in the wild yet, but I told, we actually had the opportunity to interview Tata Communications, and I'm hoping that we can release that either, you know, before the holiday or maybe after, but we will see. And similar kind of thing that I was hearing from Tata Communications, where it was like, there's all these processes kind of going on in the background that have a lot of things that could be, we could add a lot of value into things. We could make processes quicker. We could save money. We can do X, Y, and Z, to the tune of kind of similar to what you were saying, Charles. But all right, I'm going to round robin here. We're going to get to everybody, but I kind of want to get the forward-looking statements here, because that's what I'm sure everybody that's watching this wants to hear anyway. Anyways, okay. As technologies like AI, blockchain, tokenization, national systems start converging, how do you see Hedera infrastructure powering a new generation of consumer-facing or enterprise-facing applications? What might that transition look like at scale? And then just kind of more broadly, how will Hedera technology shape our future world? Whoever wants to take it, I'll let everybody kind of go a couple minutes, and then we'll have to move on to the next panel. And I thank everybody for their time.
I can do mine in 30 seconds. So I'll just say that Hedera was structured from the very beginning to be the trusted, verifiable version of the internet. People are starting to realize it, adopt it, and that's what's exciting in 2026. And you'll start to see it at scale.
That is a great
30 seconds.
Go ahead, man.
I can do 30 seconds too.
30 seconds. You go.
His example is great about how this isn't just putting finance onto the ledger. This is transforming finance itself. And that's what we're going to see. The infrastructure itself of the world is going to be transformed. We're seeing it happening now. And this will, of course, affect the consumers, and they will even use it without knowing it. That's what's coming.
I think that we have to mention, it's not been mentioned so far, agent-to-agent payments, right? Agent-to-agent payments, when it's at scale, it's going to dwarf everything else that exists today. And it requires the infrastructure. It requires the ability to be doing micropayments. It requires what we have in Hedera. And Hedera is going to be a part of enabling that for the future.
Eric?
I'm gonna say I'm excited about the tech, but let me give you the definition of tech. The T stands for tokenization race. That's what we're gonna see next year. Everybody's gonna race to tokenization. The E stands for ecosystem, and I think that our ecosystem is really strong, really solid, has a long history, which is not the case for many others, and it's going to continue to grow, including the liquidity provision. The C is I hesitated on the C because I was taking note, right? But I'm going to go with cancer, because the cancer is going to continue to grow, and the cancer is going to continue to deliver a lot of value to ourselves as a network, but also demonstrate that the business model that we've been referring to for the last hours now is the right model moving forward. And then the H is for, you pick, HBAR, HBAR, whatever you want, Hashgraph, right? But that's where I'm excited about, the tech.
And I know, Mance, I know just briefly that, I know that there's more ways to participate in Hedera Council, whether it be from a community standpoint or an enterprise or an institution standpoint that just came out a couple of months ago. So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that, which I think is awesome as well. But yeah.
Yes, no, right. So Sham is leading that. He's going to ramp that up. I think that there are announcements that are coming and related to that work that he's been doing. It is going to make it possible for, I think of it as another layer of participation in the project by organizations that perhaps aren't as large as the organizations today are that are on the council, but also provide an enormous amount of value to the project. We want those organizations to be part of Hedera, and this is going to enable us to do that. And I don't want to steal Sham's thunder, so I'm going to probably leave it there, but it's something that everyone should be watching out for.
I think it's in alignment with what Eric said, is it's good to be able to say yes every time. Kamal, we're going to close out with you here.
In my view, I do see the future in the convergence of all the other emerging technologies, where Hedera is the underlying infrastructure and the enabler for the evolution of something that computer scientists call polyglot systems / polyglot platforms, where we have Hedera Hashgraph as the underlying infrastructure, but we will see implementations with other emerging technologies, be it AI, robotics, IoT, smart cities, and so on and so forth. Hedera Hashgraph brings an unbeatable USP, which is the governance, which brings trust, credibility. And in parallel, we have robust infrastructure and a top-tier platform that is addressing the needs for innovation, disruption, all the way up to addressing the needs of highly regulated institutions. In my view, in 2 words, I see that in the convergence with other emerging technologies, and Hedera Hashgraph is not only the trust layer of internet, but also the trust layer for all other emerging technologies.
I want to ask Kamal briefly, and then I will close with Lehman. I know that you guys recently launched the Hashgraph Venture Fund as well, so kudos to you guys in that regard. I think that we need to see more kind of the follow-on funding for some of these innovators that are building out more mature solutions. So I wanted to make sure that we mentioned that as well.
Absolutely. We will absolutely. And there are actually a short list of targeted grantees that have delivered great work for the ecosystem, for the network. And the fund is dedicated and exclusive for those who are building on Hedera Hashgraph. And as I mentioned earlier on, is the continuation for our ecosystem development activities, where we tap into third-party investors and try to channel investments and capital into the ecosystem.
Awesome. Lehman, you get the final word here on this panel.
Right. For those who are listening, who are helping build that future, it's exciting to be working with you. And for those who aren't, get involved. This is an exciting future. Help make the future. Thank you.
Well, I think that sums it up perfectly. And Dr. Lehman Baird, Mance Harmon, Charles Adkins, Eric Piscini, and Kamal Yousefi, we have pretty much all of Hedera represented, the leaders that have been driving this network forward forever. And thank you so much, as Eric mentioned, to all of the other builders out there that aren't here today. We're going to transition into the next panel. I wish all of you up here today a happy holidays if you celebrate, and see you guys for the next interview.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Okay, that was fascinating. Sometimes parts of it were like maybe a bit boring. We're not going to go through the technical overview. I think we'll save that for, maybe I'll watch that on my own. But I thought it was really interesting. I don't know that we got a lot of stuff coming up in the future. I think what we really got is pretty amazing stuff in the present. So I think that's really neat. Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of funny because they've been having, I don't know if you guys took note of it, but Charles Atkinson's was talking about how they had all these conversations going on for a really long time. And then now suddenly they're actually starting to pay off. And that's kind of how it worked. How amazing was that? It was absolutely amazing, Spiritual Beers. And thanks for coming in. Boy, we got a really great audience today. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, hey, I'd really appreciate it if you do. And feel free to hit that like button as well. Usually we do a Friday live with videos during the week. And then sometimes we do like extra lives if I got an interview or one of these calls comes up. The chat was pretty interesting in the actual X stream. So, and a shout out to Ryan from Solomon from GenFinity. We had talked about doing some stuff earlier in the year, and that never materialized. But he's been in contact with me. We've been talking. We share stuff, share information. Really cool. So appreciate, a really great, perfect person to choose. Actually, I definitely think it's awesome that they chose him to run this call, and I think he did a great job. Agent to agent payments, they kind of talked about that in the beginning. I'm telling you, that is going to be huge for Hedera. It's going to be huge for crypto. Algorand has been making some inroads, and they've actually demonstrated it on chain, which is really cool. What I like about Hedera, though, is they're like, hey, this is a really important thing. We're going to make a studio for this. So they actually have like multiple AI studios that they've made to facilitate agent to agent payments, because you just can't do that. You heard Charles Atkinson's Target example, how long it takes to get paid for them. And that's like Target. Imagine agent to agent payments where that needs to happen like this and that. Can't happen on anything other than crypto. So it's going to happen. Yeah, Lori Watson, appreciate you being here. XRP is out. This will go in 2026. Totally agree. I really think HBAR is where it's at. Awesome stuff. We got Crypto Habisha in the chat, just giving a wave. Appreciate that. Luna saying hello. Just kind of going back and catching up. Julian Song, been here a few times already. Appreciate you being on here. Spiritual Beer saying great feed. I appreciate that. Julian said, if no more good news, maybe stop crashing. Well, I'll tell you what, it doesn't really have to do with, I think we're well beyond the age where news events will really move the needle much on price. It's really outside of macro conditions. The macro conditions are just really much more important now, especially once you have institutional adoption. The more institutions that are bought into this stuff, the more you're going to see that. So, yeah, I think we caught up on the chat. Not a huge chat. Spiritual Beer saying payments for agent to agent would be huge. And it's going to be huge. I mean, it's absolutely going to be huge. Just imagine that could go further to automatic tax payments, so you can see your tax deposits real time. No more end of the year BS. Yeah, and this is great. That's a really good point, actually. Imagine that you could just have it programmed so as like because I'm no longer a W-2 employee, so I don't get it taken out, and it would be great to have it just automatically figured out so that by the end of the year it just sets aside a certain amount and sends it to the IRS, and there you go. Don't bother me. And maybe I wouldn't even have to pay a tax accountant, or I don't know. That's tricky though. That's tricky because there's stuff. I have expenses that I can deduct and things like that. Literally a real-time feed of your tax payments per transaction. Yeah, something along those lines, especially in the crypto space itself, would be great. So anyway, I really appreciate everyone who tuned in today. We had a really good audience, just grew and grew, especially toward the end, which is really great. We'll probably talk about this a little bit on Friday. I always have an Algorand and an HBAR segment, and then I try to bring in one other coin if I can. Try to do 3 segments, which I'll then make into regular videos. So definitely join us on the live on Friday, 10:30 a.m. Central Standard Time. Otherwise, I really appreciate everyone tuning in. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate that. And share the video around with your friends. Anyone you think that might benefit from, seeing what's happening in the Hedera ecosystem. Because one thing I'll say that's really great, you have Lehman Baird, founder of Hedera, and he's on the call. He's addressing the community. This is something that us in the Algorand community get really frustrated with, because the guy who created it just ain't talking about it. And now he created a new fiat chain. And while he says that's going to benefit Algorand, like it's not a good look when the guy who created your chain created a new chain because he doesn't think the original chain solves the problem sufficiently. And that's a little bit frustrating. I'm not going to lie. So I like to see that. I like to see you got Lehman Baird talking to you and just giving you the lowdown. That's what you want to see. Anyway, appreciate everyone tuning in. I hope you all have a great day out there. I'm Frugal BC, and I will see you